The business of sports with the longtime certified NHL agent, Ritch Winter. And we've gotten into lots of different topics, Ritch, in the business of sport. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing well. It's been actually, I love the weather. It's cool and not sloppy, and yeah, I'm enjoying it. Just had a lot of fun, a lot of good things going on at work, and nice to have a break for 10 days with nobody's calling me from the beach.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would hope not. Now, have you ever been? I know you go to Hawaii lots. You go to the Big Island. You go to Maui. Have you ever been to the Big
We
Island?
like Oahu. We just love the action. Great restaurants. So and I did a lot of diving with sharks and stuff on the North Shore, so that's kind of fun. And yeah,
do you go deep diving?
No.
Okay.
It gets dark.
Just snorkeling.
It gets a little bit of snorkeling, a little bit of diving, but it gets dark. I panic, so I don't want to be in that cave if I can avoid it. So
well, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe 15 or 20 feet's my max.
That's kind of me too.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, like the first time I went swimming with the sharks, no cage or anything, it's like, it feels like, well, I think the first time I did it was insane jumping in the water. Like, just getting off the boat and in. But once you got in, man, I got to tell you, there is nothing more.
Was it tiger sharks? What kind of sharks was it?
Well, we did actually have a couple of tiger sharks and join us on the first gig because the first day was quite choppy. So then we weren't able to anchor, right? So they, the boat drifted, and the girl tells you got to do a little, if I do this, you get up. And there was one point where she was aggressively doing this, and we got wind of a couple of tiger sharks, but that was kind of interesting. But what I found interesting is they know that they're going to come, because what happens is the boats historically have dumped all their garbage, when they clean the fish up.
Yeah.
So when they hear a boat motor, they come that way because they're lazy. They're not interested in me. They're interested in a little bit of refuse that someone's throwing in the water. They're lazy, man.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, you know what? Maybe, or they're just smart, right?
Or they're smart. Yeah. It's sort of like going over to whatever restaurant you like. Let them do the work.
Now, you mentioned, hey, no one's talking to you. Agents, realistically, there's no reason for an agent to go to the Four Nations Cup, correct?
Not that I can see, because my experience has been, it's a struggle for the players. Like, they're getting together with guys they've wanted to play with. They probably know a little bit. Maybe they don't know them at all, and they just want to get together with them, have a coffee, go to the team room, get to know them, go out for a bite. Last thing they want to do, really. Like, I know agents like to go, maybe it's their own ego, or there's opportunities maybe to meet a few guys. Like, who don't I know? It doesn't really matter. I'd rather watch it on TV, but the players just don't want to think there's one more thing on their plate. Yeah, Ritch is texting me. No. He wants to get together. Geez. So I actually, the head of the union texted me and wondered if I was there. And I said to Marty, no, I don't bother players during a tournament. Are you going?
Now, from an NHLPA perspective, because I know they're going to have a press conference here in about 50 minutes. They're going to announce that it's going to be again in 2028. No surprise. I think this is going to be on the calendar every, starting, it'll be now, then it'll be 28, then it'll be 32, kind of 2 years after the Olympics. And, it seems like it's going to be every February because that's when the Olympics are.
Yeah.
I know Canada Cups always used to be in September. So that's what I was used to. I always liked it. I found it was a little bit better, didn't disrupt things as much. But when you talk to players, what is it about the February that the union likes? Why would they want it in February?
The union is responsible to taking care of the interests of the members. There's a group of members that love this kind of competition, and they're there. There's another group of members that love the Turks and Caicos, and that's where they are. So it really works well for them.
Okay.
It's delivering what they want. And I got to tell you, I mean, look, they're breaking, and the coverage that they're going to get for these individual games will probably be as good as they're going to get in America for the other games.
Yes.
So that's okay. I talked to the Players Association today, and I said, I get why you're doing it. And Piper Henderson there was telling me that, it's really what the members want. So that's what they get. I mean, Marty came in and delivered something. Will it be transformative? Will it help sell the game? I don't know. I mean, someone will have to measure that. I don't think so, but it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And it's sad that the Russians aren't there. I don't like the fact that they're not there. But it is what it is with the world, what things going on in the world. But I think it's going to be fun. And I guess, those guys, they're looking forward to, they're going to get 7 days off to rest and recover their bodies. You're a fan of a team that's got some, little bits of nicks and tears and things. It's good. It gives them a real energetic boost into the stretch drive, which is, as we know, that's the challenging part of the season.
What's interesting to me about, let's say Russia wasn't at war against Ukraine right now, just a hypothetical, and let's say they were in the tournament.
I guess we give Trump a week, so next year they'll be there.
Oh yeah. So let's say, if they were in it, would it be the Five Nations? Because Czechia doesn't have they don't have even 6 NHL defensemen. Right. Slovakia doesn't have 6 NHL defensemen. This is an NHL only. You can't go and get guys from Slovakia leagues or others. So I wonder, would it have just been a 5 Nations tournament if Russia was in it?
Yeah, I think likely. And then you just have to figure out how that all works in the.
I wonder what, maybe we'll hear the announcement today, but if when you talk to Marty, did they talk about this 2028? Do they have a concrete plan about how many teams?
I've been talking about other things.
Okay.
I haven't talked about this. I mean, this is really, quite frankly, from my business perspective, it's of no interest to me. Like one agent said to me the other day, guys like it and they're going to go beat their brains out and maybe make 20 grand. And risk life and limb, but they're happy. So, again, I enjoy the week off. I've been busy working on preparations for arbitrations and other things. It's really nice to go in the office at 5, 6 in the morning, which is my, what I do, and have no calls for like 4 hours. It's just awesome.
Now, with this break, there is no trade freeze and such. So technically, I guess GMs could make deals. I could see why they wouldn't, because there's no real benefit to trade the guy. You're just going to put him on your cap for a week and he doesn't play any games. So, maybe we have a surge of trades next Friday when teams come back. I highly doubt it. But as you talk, I know you said you don't talk to your guy, but you have some players who potentially could get moved here in the next 3 weeks. Take us through those conversations and how often, if you have a player, let's say on Edmonton, for argument's sake,
right,
and Edmonton was a team that wasn't in the playoffs and they were going to be trading away guys, would you be talking to Bowman weekly about, hey, my guy, he wants to go somewhere? How does it work?
It depends on the situation. It's very difficult now. I have been having conversations with one team about a player who makes close to $6 million. There's just, in this cap world, man, it's really hard to move. So you check in, you talk to them once in a while. Sometimes they'll give you, if they're interested in making the deal, give you permission to talk to other teams. Sometimes you can, by knowing more about a particular player, you can maybe get some interest. I've had only one discussion this week so far. A general manager who's thinking of bringing in a forward defenseman. He's interested in one of my defensemen. So I hope that goes, because that'd be a good spot for him. But there's not a lot. But even he said to me, I don't know how many guys are going to be talking this week. They've never had a 10-day break that he could remember in the league. So I don't know if they're shutting it down for 3 days, but I guess 3 or 4 days. My sense is most GMs, other than ones involved in the tournament itself, they're taking 4 or 5 days off. They're down in Florida, their place there. They all make way too much money, so they all have those. Us agents have to stay in Edmonton, but they're doing that, and then they're going to come back and get a little active. But they're available. I talked to 2, 3 general managers yesterday, forgetting that they were probably off on vacation. All 3 were in Florida.
Yeah. In 2014 and 2010, when the NHL was in the Olympics, they had similar breaks, right? In February, you shut the league down.
But 2010, most of those guys are still playing. They weren't GMs.
Yeah.
They weren't GMs.
That's fair. Now there was talk that the next this break would involve games in Europe, right? Because that's what they want to try to grow the game, and then we'll hear from Marty. And I wonder, I saw someone bring up a suggestion. The women's game right now has women's side, they have that rivalry, because let's be honest, all your teams are in North America. That's where I think we can talk until we're blue in the face about wanting to expand over into Europe and stuff. But when the games aren't on prime time there, it's hard to get a lot of viewers. That's just a fact, right? I know they have the websites are now in Swedish and Finnish, so that helps for sure. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But I think you could make a strong argument that if you had a 5-game series, Canada versus US, that would be more popular in North America than this tournament would be.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an interesting point. I never thought about it, but maybe you have Sweden, Russia, Sweden, Finland over there. While we have this here. That's an interesting point. I don't get this trying to sell the game to the, it's like selling ice to Eskimos, right? Like, they have the game, they follow it. They are spending as much time consuming hockey as they are. Where I would be looking at is where the biggest hockey market on the planet that is completely untouched by ice hockey in any fashion. And I'd be putting a outdoor game on the front steps of the Taj Mahal, because there's 2 billion people who watch field hockey every year. Yeah. They've never been exposed to ice hockey. We get 1/10% of the people in India watching our game, and they all love it. The fastest growing audience in Canada for hockey is the Punjabi audience, because they come over, They play a game with a 2x4 on a big field where guys are stumbling around, and they come over here and they get a touch of the feel of the stick and they see the speed. And I think we should be looking at seeing if we can capture South Asia. I'm not sure we can capture China, but there's a big market for hockey there. And I find it amazing that, we're trying to sell a market that we already have. I agree with your point about Canada, US. That'd be fun. Yeah. But I'd like to see maybe it's an outdoor game with the women over on the Taj, the front steps of the Taj Mahal, because that whole outdoor thing is so stale and so old. It was an idea that was created when,
the Order's created in 2003.
Yeah, right? I was at the first game, froze to death. And, but
had a good time.
I did have a pretty good time. I never had to wear those boots again because I've never sat out that long. But I think we got to be thinking, I'd like to see the outdoor game become like an iconic event that you look forward to. Why wouldn't we have one underneath the Eiffel Tower? Why wouldn't we have one on an ice floe somewhere up in the end? Like, create an event that's exciting and try and sell our game to people that know nothing. I remember I took Colin Wilson, who produced Avatar, a friend of mine, to a game. He's British, never seen it in his life. He says, he sits me on the shoulder at the end of the first period and goes, "What the heck's wrong with you guys?" And of course, there's so much, I don't know what you're talking about, but this game's a mess. It's run by labor lawyers. It's not very creative. I said, "So what are you thinking?" He said, "Well, this is the most exciting live experience I've ever seen in my life. These guys are working at twice the speed a man can run. They've got blades on their feet. They drop their gloves periodically on bare knuckle fighting. They're using a little stick, trying to get a little rubber thing at a goalie at the same time as they're trying to avoid being sideswiped by a guy twice their size. Why are you producing it with a camera on a 4-story balcony? There isn't a guy that hasn't watched, that has a potential fan of this game could see anything like I'm seeing because of that." And then he showed me how if you put 50 cameras here and you use the AI algorithms and I'm like, yeah, so we got to really rethink how we sell the game. But of course, the problem with television, they blow their brains out on the rights, so they don't invest much in production, right? Yeah. And so we end up having, everybody says we have the best product. Why are we dumbing it down so people who see it for the first time? I want some young 17-year-old girl that just immigrated from Mexico, sitting with her dad at the small apartment they just rented, going, "Dad, you got to come and see this, Dad. I don't know what this is, but this is insane what they're doing."
Yeah.
And yet we put it on a camera. We've all taken those pictures of the beautiful scenery at the mountains with our camera and went home and went, really not that.
Yeah, it doesn't look as good. And hey,
that's hockey.
Well, it's you sit and people who get the luxury, and there's not many seats in the first 5 rows. Right. Because my season tickets are row 17, which are great seats. But I'll tell you, from row 17 to row 1, there's still a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go from row 17 to the television or row 17 to the second deck, and it's totally different. But you sit in the building sometimes for the atmosphere as well. So I understand that.
Yeah,
but the vast majority of people would love to go to the games. You can only get 18,000 in an arena. Right. So I've never understood. I watch the games on TV sometimes. I'm like, God, the game looks slow. It's actually football players will look faster than they are.
Yep.
Whereas hockey players look slower on TV than they actually are in the game. And I agree with you on that. Television has to do and to me, the NHL should just take it upon themselves.
Produce it. Right? It makes no sense. Like, if you think of a NASCAR race, right? Like, until they got the cameras in the cars, got cameras closer to the action, like, same thing. It looked kind of, they're running around the neighborhood. Like, I don't really get it. And then you get the cameras in the right position.
Yeah.
And you're going, oh my gosh. I remember my first trip to a NASCAR race sitting in Casey Kane's pit. And wow.
F1's nuts to me. Like, you watch him in F1 because of the speed.
Yeah.
And then you see how quick he's turning. You're like, oh my God, this is a little bit
What I
different.
found funny is Casey Kane, we're in his pit. So we got, the earphones on and we're listening to what's going on. And, you forget how good these guys are, what they do. He gets out there and says, "Okay, which one of you idiots left the door unlocked?" He's traveling at 200 miles an hour, 6 inches away from a guy in front of him. But that's what he does, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, which of you idiots actually left the door unlocked? There's no door to unlock. Leave us alone. But it's fascinating that I think we've cheated the players. I get so frustrated. I think if we do this right, we're making way more money. We have way more fans. These kids, we let them down. The only people in our game that are held accountable are the guys on the ice, right? Yeah. That's, Calvin Pickard lets a 5-hole softie in. Everybody's talking about it tomorrow. And I think we need to have the same level of accounting off the ice to generate the money that these kids need to be comfortable for the rest of their lives, because most of them leave the game without enough to do that. And it's insane that they leave the game with no medical benefits. It's just crazy. And I think we need to be thinking of how to generate more revenue through various different means so that we can take care of these guys. We all make a lot of money, you included, because of what you do, me included because of what I do. We need to take care of them. It's not fair. These guys donate too much and dedicate too much to do what they do for our benefit, that we just let them down.
Ritch Winter joins us here in the business of sports on Sports 1440, Oilers Nation, YouTube, Facebook, and X, sports1440.ca. When we return, we got a lot of questions. We'd like to do this once out of every 4. We just talk a lot about get Rich's opinions on different things. We've had a lot of great guests in here. If you missed them, I highly recommend going back. Stephen Hauska was unbelievable last week. Also, when we get back, we got some interesting questions in regards to the agency negotiation stuff, but also looking big picture business and sports and AI and more in the Gregor Show, presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Welcome back, Jason Gregor. Ritch Winter in the business of sports on Sports 1440, Oilers Nation, YouTube, Facebook, and X. As always, the Gregor Show presented by PlayAlberta.ca. Get in the game. And of course, it is Wednesday night, and that means Canada, Sweden. You can get in on that. Use the promo code Gregor50 and get a free $50 play at PlayAlberta.ca. Also, it is Wednesday, and you know what that means. The trusty Lotto 649. 12 million up for grabs tonight. Get your tickets. PlayAlberta.ca. Let's get to some question period time. I got to start with this one just because it's a little fun. Hey, has Ritch ever considered running for politics? That was a polished rant for the NHL's working class. I loved it, from Darren.
I wouldn't give that a thought if my life depended on it, man. Is there a bigger bully pit to just get pushed around in at this point in life? Yeah, it's fine. My wife's dad was mayor for many years, East Purvis, and learned enough through that. But that would be, if there's more work required to accomplish less in some other profession, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it seems like it for sure. Hey, Ritch, how often do agents or GMs use the media to float stuff out to the league and the general public? That one comes from Truck in the Park.
Well, Truck, I would say Alan Walsh always, and the rest of us almost never. Because the reality is, I did it in the old days. Because,
so you did used to do it?
Oh, yeah. Then the Esatikin and Craig Meany days, we did those kinds of things because there wasn't a salary cap, and the owner's watching and he's being affected by it. Because you knew, like, he had more money. Well, maybe Pauckland didn't, but we thought he did. And so it was oftentimes a way to get it. Glenn, Slats wasn't really a guy that fell for it much, but Peter was pretty good at taking the bait. So in the old days I did, but also now it's so much more civil now, because in the old days when a guy says, I don't have any more money in my budget, you go like, that's, you just didn't have any reason to believe that. Now when he says I only have 800 left on the cap, you go, oh yeah, I looked it up. He only has 800 left on the cap. So we just get along a lot better, because there isn't a battle over an amorphous pie that doesn't exist. We know what the pie is. We know it exists. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised to say that this wasn't true early on, because I was a bit of a battler, but I would say, I'm really close friends with a lot of these guys. I really like them.
Right.
I talked to a couple of guys today, and they're down with their wives in Florida, and they're telling me about, I've met one of their wives, and I talked to one of the, Steve Eiserman has 3 girls. We often talk a lot about his 3 girls, my 4 girls, kind of check in on each other. And I was thinking of a story. I can't tell that one, but it's just different. It's just not of any value. And a lot of guys will just shut you down. Well, you do that in Lou Lamoriello's backyard, good luck.
Right.
So yeah, you just talk to guys, be upfront, try really hard. I mean, they don't always see it the way you see it. And sometimes I always find it interesting negotiating during the course of the season, because on Tuesday after that hat trick, we think we're getting $5 million. And on Wednesday, when he went -4 and gave away those 3 bad passes, he thinks he's getting them on a 2-way. And it really is challenging. But outside of that, I mean, I think during the season, the broadcasts take care of it to an extent themselves. But no, it's a waste of time.
This one comes in from Doug. I'm curious, Ritch, how long does it take to forge a relationship with the GM where that you can have a fair, quick, and prompt negotiation?
Well, I don't know. It just depends on the situation. Depends on, like, there's so many dynamics that are going on in a negotiation. You might think that the naive might think that we're only focused on X amount for the player. That's fair. well, you got, Swayman in the background looking for $1 billion, and, like there's all kinds of dynamics happening. So it really depends on the situation. I'd say I've the most, I mean, I get along with everybody. We kind of get to know each other's proclivities. Some guys will, some guys, if they think he's worth $1 million, they'll offer you 950 and settle at $1 million. And you just know that, right? And other guys will start at 600. Tree is amazing. Brett Trelawney, he starts at $1 and we end up at $4 million. Like it's just, but his style, it's different. And he's good. He grinds you down and you get tired, but you got to stay with it. But, it's, yeah, it takes a while, but I mean, I've been doing this for, you say 40 years, I think.
No, I've made 35. Come on. Now.
But I know the guys like Lou Lamoriello was an old guy when I started. He's 82 now, and he's probably sharper and brighter and in better shape than most of us. But yeah, everybody has a style, and you just got to accept that. And but it does, I think, where it comes into play, where things like, I got a guy on a tryout, right? And I have enough faith in the GM that I can trust him. One issue is always, and I'll give you an example without naming names. It was the most devastating experience I've ever had in my life. So, so a guy makes you an offer, right? There's no, if he tells you it's open for acceptance till noon, Friday, you call him at 12:01, that's your problem, not his, right?
Right.
But if he doesn't give you a deadline, there's just a generally accepted understanding that it's open. It's open.
So,
right?
like, if he offered a client, here's $1 million.
Yeah.
For instance.
Yeah. So he says, I'll give you, Rich, I'll let me get back to you. And sometimes I'll wait a little bit because I want to see if that wait will get him to move a little bit, talk to the player. One time I got a call from a general manager and he offered me 1.5, 2 years. And it's the only time I had an offer pulled without notice of it. So I called him back on Monday, and he's arrogant. He's no longer in the game. He's a dick. And so he said, offers off the table. I said, what do you mean offers off the table? I just talked to the player. He's accepted it. I didn't have any deadline. Yeah, I just felt that it's off the table. Too bad. And he was just really rude about it. And that sad thing about that is that player would have signed that 2-year deal that he accepted. Instead, he was in Russia on the plane that crashed. And he died because it just seems horrific consequences from a guy being, not true to his word. But that's the kind of thing where relationships are important. Like I know, like if Ken Holland says, I'll make us $2 million and I call him back in a week, it's still $2 million. He might call me on Wednesday and say, hey, I really do need to hear from you.
Right.
But he's not pulling it. And so that's where the trust element comes in. Or when I remember bringing Adam Ernie in here. Ken promised him 3 exhibition games. Adam felt like, okay, if I get that, I can show myself. And so many times you get a guy go in and he's promised 4 games and he gets a sniff in 1 game. So that's where the relationship comes into play. And it's really important because Adam Ernie's fighting for a deal. He's getting either 7.75 or 0.
Right.
The negotiations are 6 or 6.5 or 6.2. It's really insignificant in the end of it. But so and it takes a long time to test a guy, see if that's going to be the case, right? And there's certain places I would never send a guy on a tryout based on the representation of the GM because I know he'll have 100 reasons why he couldn't make it happen.
Right. Okay. So there is, you do learn, right? And people's words obviously matter. So from the legality standpoint, because there's lots of agents that are lawyers, and if you have a verbal agreement, it doesn't really stand up, right? Like if I say to you, Rich, over the phone, it's $1 million, does it stand like you can't go to court over it? It's just more of an honor system, correct?
Well, you can't because in the real world you can because the agreement, verbal agreement, if understood and provable, is no different than a written agreement.
But how could you prove it, I guess, is the question.
Well, that's the challenge, right?
You'd have to record the interview.
You had a buddy on the call with you, had one of your staff listen in. But in this case, it's very specific. You don't have a deal till it's filed with the league.
Yes, that's the league rule, right?
That's the league rule. But our rule is, with the guys we can trust, is, it's the reverse of I thought your handshake was like oak in the old Jerry Maguire movie. There's certain guys, when you make a deal, you have a deal. I don't even give it a thought. Like I'll have players call me. Are you worried? I'm getting paperwork. Hey guys, it's Saturday. Like he'll get it. Like don't worry about it. It's Kenny or it's Tree or whoever it is. As much as Tree can be tough to deal with at times, he's the honorable guy. I don't worry about it, right? So Yeah. She just,
Have you ever had a player change their mind on a contract? Like they had verbally agreed and then the player changed his mind.
he didn't actually change his mind, but he thought about it. And Marian Hossa had, after he played in Detroit, we had got Ken to agree. He'll sign a 1-year deal, but you got to let us into the marketplace the minute the playoffs are over. Because we got a lot to decide in a short period of time. Mary's a very successful businessman. He doesn't think like most hockey players. We wanted to be prepared. So we were negotiating with Chicago. We had a deal, 12 years, all the money he wanted. Seemed like the right place. And he called me up like 40 minutes before free agent. Remember, Chicago traded Havlat, I think, to San Jose. I can't remember.
Yes.
So they made room for him on the cap, made room for him on the roster. And Marian says, do you think Dale would mind if I just sort of looked into free agency and saw if there was anything else out there? Because I'm kind of liking the Tampa possibility. There's no reporters there. It's quiet. You know, Marian's not a real big fan of the media in terms of just the activity. He likes to keep to himself. So I said, well, like, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'll call. And I thought Dale Dallin was going to fall off his chair and jump out of the window. But, you know, I said, I was just asking, you know, and so he went through with it, but it certainly gave Dale a bit of a heart murmur at that point.
So, you know, and that's obviously the closest it came. But as an agent, when you go through the negotiation process with players, and you know, and you're talking, okay, you know what, Steve, this guy offered you 2 years, or this guy, because I know for a fact here in recent memory, some players have turned down a contract offer from a team on June 20th or May 20th, whatever it is you know, 5 years or whatever, and because they're like, well, I think I can get more. And now as an agent, obviously, no one's 100% at reading the market because it's still a market, right? And the market can change, but you get a sense of it. How do you go through to tell your guy, like, hey, there's not a better offer coming? Do you have, like, do you got to be very strict? Like sometimes, like, hey, I'm your agent. This is my job. And my job's not to, you know, to tap your hand and say, yes, everything's great. How do you learn to balance that sometime where you maybe got to put the player in his place? Say, dude, like, you're not a $6 million player. You're not getting a $6 million offer. This 4.2 is the best offer you're going to get.
I'd never handle it exactly that way because you wouldn't want to tell the guy he's not a $6 million player because that's not going to make him too flattered. But what you'd say is, you know, like, my job is not to convince him to say yes. My job is to forcefully, when necessary, help him understand the risks.
Okay.
And if he makes the decision, then he has to live with it. But I had a player a while back who had a really good world championship, really good. And the team that had his rights offered him $775 over $500. Team wasn't very good. This is a pretty good player, played in the NHL. He was going to get every opportunity to play. And I was just like, man, like, you got to take this deal. Like, you just got to take this deal, man. I don't think there's a combination of, I always tell players, 2 things in every deal: opportunity and money. I always chase opportunity because it always leads to money. So I said, it's here. You're going to play 40 games. You're going to play the season. You're going to get a one-way contract. You're going to play in the NHL for 5 years. Nope. I want a one-way. So it was like $775 over $550. And we're very sure he's playing half a season at worst in the NHL. So he over like $75,000. He said no. And I reminded him, I called him back another time. I said, you know, this is a big risk here, buddy. And he ended up signing an AHL deal for $250. Right. And the team, you know, of course the team went on to something else when he didn't take it. And so that's frustrating. I do remind him periodically, except for, you know, you didn't take that deal, but you got to let them make their own decisions. And to this player's credit, he didn't blame me. He took responsibility himself. He said, look, I made a decision. I have to live with it, you know? And that's our job, is to make sure that he doesn't reach that point where there's no other offer on the table. In this case, an NHL 2-way. Don't make putting yourself in a position as, why didn't you tell me? Like, right. Really?
Yeah.
Like, buddy, like, you're out of your mind. Your wife's pregnant, man. This is nuts what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you tell them that. And I'm going to call you. I want you to think about it. I'm calling you in the morning. Go through it again. I think with this player, I went through it probably 2 or 3 times because the GM was like, I'm going like, I agree. You're right. I mean,
do you keep him as is there a time when you drop them as let's say, you know what, maybe our views don't drop?
No, because it's his life, right? I mean, I respect his ability to make a decision. Now, maybe I would feel that way if he was, you know, he committed to a deal and then didn't follow through, embarrassed himself, embarrassed me. But look, I mean, this player had a lot of confidence himself, was a little bit unjustified in the circumstances. He was a little bit older, late 20s. It's tough, good, really good. He scored, at the NHL level, decent over a couple hundred games, but he's not at 28. There's a lot of 22-year-olds, buddy. There's a lot of 21-year-olds coming. I got to tell you, take this deal. You get yourself 50 games in the NHL, you're getting a 3-year deal at maybe $1 million. Like, you got to take this deal.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, when you're that aggressive with them, there's never any pushback after the fact. That's what your job is.
The John Klingberg situation from Dallas a few years ago.
Yeah.
When now all the reports were, and so reported by some guys pretty close that, and John actually spoke about it once where he turned down I think it was 7 years at $8 million or something.
Yeah, something terrible.
And then ended up I'm going to go to the market. Have you ever had a player who wanted to test the market that bad, but still luckily got the deal or close to it? Or did you ever have anybody in that Klingberg situation where they turned down a lot and then, I know the one you mentioned, but like a big time long-term deal?
No, I've never had that. I think with my guys, for the most part, generally security is an issue. I remember like Esa Tikkanen would have said no to that deal. Like Esa was just one of a kind, but most, it depends, like I just don't have guys that they're more, I think because I've had a European client base for most of my life. You see, the Europeans build cars to last 40 years. They build homes to last 300 years. Everything's longer term in their focus. They're living in the same house that their grandmother lived in with when their parents were young. They tend to really be more aware of the importance of long-term planning. So I just find most of the guys, they don't really find. I didn't have anybody that took that position. Now, Marian Hossa turned down an awful lot of money, but he made it. But he had a plan. He had a plan. He was quite comfortable turning it down. Now, if he was looking for the big money and he would have turned that down, I'm sure we'd have had a different conversation. But everybody, I think we just inform our guys a lot. I'd like to think, and they have a pretty good understanding of what it is. They understand what the risks are, and thank goodness no one's. It's sad when it'd be sad to see. I don't know what Klingberg's done okay, but. Especially a guy turned down a big contract that could set his family up for life.
Like mentally, it's hard to get over, I think, for some people.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that was not an easy one for him to get over.
Right, and then you throw in the injury and stuff like that, and so you think John Klingberg comes back. To me, it kind of shows that there's a physical ability there, but there's a mental toughness factor that he's being able to say, okay, you know what? Yeah, I might have made a mistake. Now, lucky enough, he had made money prior to that it didn't bankrupt him. Like he was good with his money. He had made, I think, 25 or 30 million already to that point. So it wasn't like he had, it was coming out of his entry level deal, had made $1.5 million, and then just turned down 50 million and has only made like 2 million since. Even then, if he only made 2 million since, it's still pretty good. But in the grand scheme of the numbers,
you see a guy like James Neal turned down. My understanding was he turned down a deal, virtually the same deal he got. Could have had one year less, and he was like, "Are you serious? Like you're happy in Vegas? Vegas has no state tax. You're like you don't even have to buy shoes. You can live in flip flops, right? What are you thinking? It's a great team, and look what happened to him. That must have been. I don't know James at all, but that had to be a tough one."
Jason Gregor, Ritch Winner with you on Sports 1440. When we come back, I do want to. We've talked a lot because I know you have lots of contacts in other sports, and so I do have some business of sport questions not related to the NHL next on the Gregor Show, presented by PlayAlberta.ca. It's the business of sport. Jason Gregor, Connor Halley, Ritch Winner with us. The business of sport continues on. Ritch. The other thing that, that has started to happen a little bit more often all of a sudden. And, Brandon Saad was a unique case because he had $4 million left next season. And he mutually agreed to terminate his contract just because he wanted to get out of St. Louis, I guess. Maybe they threatened to send him to the minors. I don't know. But so he gets out of it and then signs in Vegas for $1.5 million. Now he's made a lot of money. So for some guys, like they're literally willing to walk away from $4 million the next year, which I know after taxes is $2 million, but whatever. It's a lot of money you're walking away from because happiness, everything else. Yes, Puljujärvi just did it in Pittsburgh. Then he signs an AHL deal with Florida's minor league team and go there. Is that a trend you're going to see more of here? Just because like some players, when you're a 30-year-old veteran and you've made enough money, you've always talked about opportunity, chase that over money anytime, that even though a guy is going to walk away from 1 year left at $4 million plus whatever he was making the rest of this season, to make a prorated 1.5, a lot more players are going to be willing to do it because, it was basically Brandon Saad was able to get traded where he wasn't tradable due to his contract. And now suddenly he got traded and got to go to the team he wanted. And the Blues are like, oh, great. We get out of this contract. We're happy. Vegas is like, great. We got a player for nothing. Right? Like it's a win-win all over. Do you think we're going to see more of this?
Well, I think it depends on the situation, but I think I've always said, I don't like to get players overpaid. People will be surprised to hear that, because I think there's a range where a player's reasonably paid. At the lower end of the range, the team's kind of happy with that deal, but the player's not miserable. Let's say he's worth $1 million, he's getting $925. Yeah, it's a little low, but and if at the upper end, he might be $1.1 million. You want to be I want to be at the upper end of that range, but when he gets way above that, it becomes a problem, because he's now way overpaid. He's getting harassed. His trade talk all the time. His kids at school are getting jibbed a little bit because their dad's not performing. Being overpaid is a recipe for a great degree of unhappiness. Being underpaid, same thing, but not as painful. So you see a guy like that, and they're just not happy. They want to enjoy the game. They're hockey players. They got in this to play. He's not playing much. He's not getting an opportunity. So he may have done the calculation in his own mind. Look, I'm going to give up $4 million next year, but if I get in there on a long playoff run and show them, because sometimes happens, coaches have fallen out of love with a player. Doesn't mean he's not any good, right? It just means if coach fell out of love with him and he's not playing him, so he goes somewhere else. Maybe he says, you know what? For half a season or a quarter of a season, I'm going to take a little bit less money. I'll get a deal next year because I know what I can do. And so I think in those situations, you'll see it. And players just don't like being abused. And sometimes coaches, they're all subjectively oriented. They all have biases and they make a lot of mistakes. If they were so smart, Dominik Hasek doesn't go from the minors to the NHL MVP a year later, right? These guys are human and they don't make all the right decisions. And sometimes the player and we are right. So I don't know the dynamics behind Brandon Saad, but I think we're seeing more often where teams are saying, willing to consider that. Players are willing to consider it because it's now happened more often. Like we're a copycat league, right? So
yeah,
big defenseman on a team wins a cup, everybody gets a big defenseman. No one seems to have a strategy. Players are taking buy-ups. Well, if he did it, like why wouldn't I do it?
Yeah. And I'm sure if it happens too frequent, then they'll probably put a change in the CBA somehow. I don't know, and maybe they won't. I do want to add, when we talk about the business of sport and you look at hockey overall, and obviously the NHL is the peak of hockey. Yeah. But in order to get there, you need all the other levels and you need development, and that's very key. And then you need junior hockey and everything like that. And when I look at, the development model in Canada and, a simple thing like the WHL, I would change the WHL draft to a year later, like they have in Ontario, like they have in Quebec. And because I know that, they don't want to change that because of,
the guys in the pipeline.
Yeah, blah, blah. And I'm like, give me a break. But second of all, you move it up, then you could do something even better because and the numbers match it up. There's lots of kids leaving hockey when they get to contact, right? Because they don't like it. There's lots of no contact leagues now. Great. But to me, you've got 3 years of U17, right? Why not have 3 years of it would technically be U16, but the first year would all be first years. They would all learn contact together. None of them would be WHL draftable if you're worried about it in Alberta and BC and stuff, because Ontario, their leagues, they only have a 1 year for everybody anyway. So they all learn at the same time anyway. We could probably implement that here. But if you're not going to me, like I look sometimes at the NHL and these other leagues and I'm like, to me, there should be more think tanks together to say, how do we help the game of hockey that isn't just a game of the NHL?
Oh yeah, it's like, I mean, these are monopolies, right? Run by oftentimes lawyers. They're not very innovative or creative. I just think it's frustrating to me to see all of the errors made. Like, for example, there's not a really good coaching leadership program to teach players sort of the love, more embracing, inspiring approach that we talked about a few weeks ago with Steve Hauska. Like, it's just the whole thing is in many ways a mess, and we need to really look at what's going to bring players in. I don't know if your example is a good one or a bad one. I'd have to do a lot more research and think about it. But at the end of the day, why do we insist that a player, not play where he wants to play hockey? What if a young 14-year-old kid? We're seeing more movement now. We're seeing some of the American junior or the Alberta Junior Hockey League teams moving out to play in the BC League. Like, we got to think about what's best for the kids. Like, they're kids. Like, I find it weird. I remember went to a game a number of years ago in Red Deer, and the goalie from Swift Current, for the Swift Current Broncos was from Red Deer, and the goalie for Swift Current or for the Red Deer was from Swift Currents. Like, how is that making sense to anybody? I don't understand. I'm a dad. I have find it completely incompatible with good family upbringing to pull a kid out of his house when he's 15, 16 to live with another family. And oftentimes the mom kind of has a hankering to him. I mean, it's a mess, this whole thing. And we've seen so much abuse at so many levels. I just wish we'd think of the kids more. Like, how, if you're their dad, what would you do? I think we need more kind of parental type discussions around the game itself, because it doesn't really matter, if the Swift Current Broncos have a goalie from away. Like, let's figure out how we can keep these kids at home more.
Yeah, and like there's I think lots of conversation. Obviously, nothing will be perfect, and that's fine. Yeah. But you can always look to improve. And I still find that hockey is glacier moving, and that's probably even complimentary. Yeah. As far as to wanting to invoke change at a lot of other levels. And even at the lower levels, the minute they try to make one, it's like, oh, geez, you know what? They think about the small percentage it helps, and they don't think about the bigger gains, which would actually benefit, because hockey's having fewer kids play all the time. Yeah. Well, that's not what you want.
No.
Right? And I get that, some of the kids maybe don't have the passion to be pros. I don't care. That's not what it's about. And hockey's proven statistically to be a late developing sport. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. That's numbers, data over years and years of research that it's true. And so if we're having kids in the game who might end up being really good, and they're out of the game early for a variety of different reasons, because as simple as, you get into contact. Now your kids, everybody's a year older in Alberta. And guess what? They don't do it in lots of other parts of our own country, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me there's not a better option, because it's actually there, and we choose in Alberta not to do it. And to me, I just think it's
like why
ridiculous.
Can't the elite player play up three age groups? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, why would you, look at FC Barcelona? Like, Messi didn't play with the 14-year-olds. When he's 14, he played with the 16-year-olds. When he was 16-year-old, he played with the men. We don't allow that. We need to allow people to develop at their own speed. We need to be
they do that because you allow the in the WHL, you can have like Mickey.
But at the lower ages, you can't do all those things. We just need more flexibility that's focused on the development of the child, right?
Yeah.
Not Hockey Canada's a rule. The typical immune response in organizations that don't improve is, we don't do it here that way.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the whole thing I don't know if we talked about here on air about get the puck to the net. Well, why? And I've never found a hockey guy to give me an answer. And the answer is, don't send the puck to the net unless it's the most viable option. If you know a guy's in a high scoring, danger scoring position, get the puck to him. If you're in a high danger scoring position, get the puck off your stick towards the goalie. And if you have none of those options, get the puck to the net, and create some chaos, because that's all you got. And there's just so many intuitive mantras that make absolutely no sense. Remember when the Europeans first came over? Oh, it's fine. Yeah, the forwards, but nah, those defensemen, they can't skate backwards. That big ice service and and then the goalies, they can't play. You see that Hashi guy? I don't know what he's doing. And it's just one after the other. We break them down over time. But I just wish there was some better, deeper, more meaningful thinking into what the game could do for us as a community versus a few elite coaches, players, and people who are trying to hold on their jobs at places like Hockey Canada,
When you talk, because you talk to guys in lots of different sports and agents and other sports, of course, and when you first started, actually, you're into acting and other representing other stuff like that. If you could look at it from a utopian view, what is one thing you would like to see integrated into the NHL that isn't here now?
Well, I'd like to see them hire a Hollywood producer and produce the game in a way that we could actually see the game in the same fashion that it unfolds in front of us in row 5. Because it's just like, it's crazy that there's things that we do. We still have the cameras sitting in the same place they were in the Montreal Forum when the first game was televised between the Canadiens and the Detroit Red Wings. We need to think about our product. We need to figure out how to bring it to the masses, and we need to make it compelling, because if we could get everybody in India to come and watch a game live, we would have 10 to 15% of that audience on television every single week. But we got to get them to understand that the game that they're seeing on television reflects the game that we have. We just don't produce it right. I think we need to call, I would say if there's one thing in the game, call the penalties, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I've argued.
Like
man,
you like actually enforce the rule book?
You mean, like I've tried, like a lot of times, I've just given up. Cop stops me, I'm going 15 over. I mean, I just give up. I mean, you do the crime, you have to pay the time. But like, I just don't get it. Like, well, it's an important game. Well, Connor McDavid took it in his own hands the other day. It just makes no sense. You're allowed to hurt. Like, we created rules to protect and create a healthy, clean, vibrant, but physical game. Call the rules. Yeah. It's not Yellowstone. It's hockey, guys.
That's the most simple one that seems just something the NHL doesn't want to do.
Well, I think he's going to let it go late in this game. He's going to let him play.
Yeah.
Holy smokes! I think that he might be dead.
Yeah.
It makes no sense whatsoever. It's so simple.
Yeah, I don't get it. Ritch, great stuff. We look forward to it. We got a few big guests coming up in the next few weeks in the business sports. Should be fun. Have yourself a great week. Enjoy the World Cup and enjoy the non-calls from the beach.
You mean I'm going to have to stop watching the rest of Yellowstone and watch a hockey game? I don't think so.
No, well, what season are you on?
People will be surprised. We're on season 3. I've never watched a series because I hate series because you get wired. You have to keep watching them. We're just finishing up season 3. I think we're
okay. We got 2 left.
Yeah, so I'll finish off tonight. I watch a little hockey, but
like how many episodes are you watching tonight? 2?
2 or 3. Yeah,
2 or 3. Ooh, committed.
Yeah, we're committed. I committed to Cindy to spend some time watching it, so we're gonna watch it. And then I guess the next is Blue Bloods, but I hear there's 297 episodes. I don't know.
What about like 18? Have you watched like the prequels to Yellowstone? I actually argue they're better.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, I haven't watched 1923.
I think it's a little bit over the top.
It is over the top. I didn't fit. Yellowstone was one of the episodes I just gave up on. I was like, too many of the characters became unlikable for me, and I love.
I think if they did exactly the same thing, but people weren't, because people aren't getting shot and killed in Montana. There's nothing happened. But if they were beat to a pulp and didn't complain, like there was just a way of making that more believable. But it's a great storyline. It keeps you interested. That battle between good and evil and trying to figure out who the heck is evil. It's all right.
I do want to quickly get to this because athletes first, of course, agency in the NFL that represents players for the second consecutive year. Now they have 32 players coming up in the NFL draft. And they said they will respectfully pass on any cognitive or psychological assessment, the teams want to do on their players. They're not going to allow them anymore. What do you make of that as an agency? You think that's something that's, now not the NHL, I don't think has that, right? Does the NHL have the cognitive or psychological assessments?
Yeah, most teams do it. We don't have a problem with it because ultimately I want, for my business, I want the best product on the ice.
Okay.
So if there's a reason, there's a way of a team getting more information to make sure as they struggle out of the doldrums of having failed for 5 years under a bad management team, that they have a higher probability of selecting a player that has a chance to take them to the promised land, but might miss out on that because of a psychological assessment that finds out he's got issues at multiple levels that will not allow him to be a leader in that locker room. I want them to get the best player. I mean, I don't think transparency should be number one here to make sure that we don't pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I don't think it's helpful to anybody. It's not helpful to the kid who goes drafted way higher than he should. Maybe if he did a psychological test, he'll go in the 6th round, get a lot of pressure off him, allow him to develop. Maybe it's even better for him. Sure, the agency might miss out on the big signing bonus they get in the NFL, but I just think, I wouldn't hide an injury, and I don't think we should. It's just deceptive, and I don't agree with it.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich. We appreciate it. Great stuff. We'll talk to you next week.